Hi, Denise, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. So, today we're going to dive straight on in. You became pregnant, and did you know from the get-go that you wanted to
Mm.
have a home birth?
I would say we knew from the beginning that we weren't going to have a hospital birth. Me and my husband, before we got married, we were talking about kids, and he had mentioned that we're going to have a home birth. And I kind of just brushed it off because I didn't feel passionate about it, but I also didn't, I was kind of indifferent to the topic. So, but it was always on my mind, that he had mentioned that we were going to have a home birth. And after we got married is when I started to research now, like, what is it to birth and what are my options? Because I like to be very prepared. And I just knew we weren't doing hospital. I remember going on Spotify and typing in natural birth, and then your podcast, popped up. I started listening to some episodes, and then that's when I kind of heard, okay, I can birth in like a birth center. I could do home possibly. And we decided to try out the birth center. So we went to a couple, we toured them and they were nice, but I didn't really like the idea of having multiple midwives and not knowing who was going to show up. So we decided to do home birth, and it felt a little scary in the beginning because to have your first and do home, and it's not really something that is done in your family. But yeah, we made the right choice with that.
I love that. So, I love that it was your husband who was like,
Hmm.
"We're gonna have a home birth." So, I want to hear the story
Yeah.
behind that. Was he born at home? Was he his family, his
No,
mom, like how, why? Like, that's very rare, like that it comes from the
it
men. So I'm very
is.
curious about his story. Do you want to share it with us?
Yes. So I believe he's mentioned that he watched that movie. It's something about the hospital with
With
the
Ricki
business of
Lake?
being born.
Yeah, business of being
Yes.
born. Yeah. That is
Yes. And I
such
still have
a,
not watched it.
oh, good. I think it's great for maybe maidens to watch who are not planning to be
Hmm.
pregnant right now, and like for the partners to watch.
Yes.
Or if a woman is considering a hospital birth, I do think you should watch Business of Being Born so that you
Hmm.
know what you're
Okay.
navigating, right? But if you're planning a home birth or a birth center birth, just stay
You
clear.
don't need to scare yourself.
I mean and that is old. It's an old documentary now by Ricki Lake. I mean, she has a new one now about
Hmm.
the business of birth control, right? So I
Okay.
mean, I don't know if it's like 10, 15 years old, that documentary, but it's still really valid and it's actually worse
Yeah.
than it was back then. So like,
I'm sure the numbers are very
yeah.
different.
I
Yeah.
love that he watched that. Very rare too that a man would
Hmm.
watch that just randomly being interested in
Yeah.
birth. I love that though. I think men should be interested
Yeah.
in birth and the birth of the new, generation as well,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and I'm thankful that he did watch it because who knows, like had he not, maybe I would have just, done what the typical thing is, not really question it and do the hospital.
Yeah.
Um, so that, yeah, that got me thinking a lot.
And for anyone who's listening to this who um, is planning a hospital birth, or your husband or partner is really adamant you should have a hospital birth, there, one of the beautiful sponsors of the Natural Birth podcast is Informed Pregnancy TV, and you can get three
Mm.
free days where you can watch The Business of Being Born. So get a free trial,
Oh,
put your
awesome.
partner on
Mhm.
it, and watch
Yeah,
it, and it's also orgasmic birth is in there, so you can watch The Business of Being Born, and then you can watch orgasmic birth,
yeah.
and maybe it's gonna be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a home birth, we're gonna have an orgasmic birth.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's funny because I recommend that movie to people, but I've still never watched it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's good. Keep your mind clear of that and focus on what you do want when you want
Yeah,
a natural
focus
home
on the
birth.
positive. Hmm.
So, okay, so you toured the birth centers, you found out, oh, no, it's
Hmm.
not for us. And then did you find an independent
Yeah.
midwife, or did you find a publicly funded one, or how did you go about
Yeah.
finding your home birth midwife?
hmm So when I had decided that we were gonna go the route of a private midwife, we had just gotten married, I believe. Like we weren't even really thinking about having kids yet. So once we were more serious about having kids, but again, not exactly trying. I just started looking at all of the Arizona registered midwives, and I just started calling them up, seeing if they were still taking on clients, if they're still active. And I kind of like shortened my list. As soon as we found out that I was pregnant, I started calling all of the midwives, setting up interviews um, so that I could meet them in person. And we found our midwife when I was like, I must have been like 3 weeks pregnant. It was so early. Yeah,
That
it
is
was so early.
that's
I
so
just love
early.
being prepared.
I love how prepared you were. Like that's that is some sort of record, you know? That's
Yes.
crazy. I mean, I love it. Of course, we have to be aware of the possibility that, it's quite still that high chance of,
hmm
babies might
Yeah.
not always last the first trimester. Some come and go.
Yeah.
They're little angels that come and go, and it's a part of, some women's journey.
It's part of
Um,
it.
but of course you can be
Yeah.
prepared.
I was
Um,
very trusting in the
yeah.
pregnancy and in the process. And I at 5 weeks is when I called her up and said, like, can we start? Well, we selected her at the 5 weeks,
Mm,
and um she said, "Are you sure you want to have your first appointment? Like, do you want to wait?" And I said, "No, I want to start
yeah,
now because I feel like the sooner you start, the better. And if
yeah.
that does happen, if the pregnancy doesn't unfold, then like
Mm.
that's okay too. And we can just, reconnect when it happens again." So I didn't, I didn't have a problem like starting it early
And
and,
you know what? I agree with that. And also, it can be actually really supportive to have a midwife that will, if you do miscarry, that, you know, you
absolutely.
have someone who can guide you through that and you can call them and
Hmm
get support and you don't necessarily feel like you want to go into hospital. You don't have to
Yeah.
when, if you do end up losing your baby and having that really beautiful support can be amazing. So
hmm
I
Yeah.
think, anyone listening, like, yeah, do it. And also, that's what I say about
Mm.
taking the natural birth course. I recommend everyone starting, you know, as you transition from first trimester to second trimester, like start then, like with your preparation, if not earlier, but like
Yeah.
definitely start then. So many come to me or buy my courses in the third trimester, and that's fine. But, a lot of the stuff we do, you can start very early. It's like rewiring the subconscious mind and working with,
Right.
visualization and practicing the things that you need to practice to really create the pathways in your brain to have those as real good tools like relaxation, mental focus,
Yeah.
breath work. Um, yeah, like rewiring your subconscious mind takes time. And so
Yeah.
I
hmm
think, taking your birth preparation courses or doing the prep, you can start that as soon as you get pregnant, but especially I think you should start
hmm
already, like as you go through that threshold from 12 weeks, starting your second
Yeah.
trimester. Anyways, we're going to dive on into your birth story now. So, do you want to take us back to, did
Um,
you have any kind of early signs of labor approaching for you? What week were you in when you maybe went into early
hmm
labor, or did you have some sort of like on-off starting business? Yeah, tell us about your journey.
Yeah. It was great. So I had my first signs of labor was at 38 weeks. So I was huge at that point. And I remember thinking, because of just listening so much from your podcast, knowing that first time moms usually go past their due date. So I was fully expecting, to go past the 40 weeks. And, if I got to 42 weeks, I was perfectly fine with that too. And no, so at 38 weeks, I remember going up to use the restroom at night. It must have been around 10:30. And I got up to use the restroom and I heard like a little bit of a pop. And so it was some of my water's breaking. I could feel it wasn't too much water. It was just kind of like a trickle. So I was super excited when I heard that happened. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to bed. I'm gonna tell my husband and I'm just gonna go to sleep because that's what everybody says is they say go to sleep, get your rest. And yeah, so I kind of nudged my husband, let him know like my water broke. You're probably gonna want to call at work tomorrow because that was a Thursday night. The next day was Friday. So it's like you're just gonna want to call off for Friday because the baby might come tomorrow. So I didn't text anybody. I didn't text my midwife or my doula. I just went to back to bed. And then I started feeling some like light cramping sensations. It wasn't painful at all. And it wasn't as strong as my typical like period cramping. It was like even more mild than that. And I mean, I was 38 weeks pregnant, so I was going to the restroom like 4 times a night at that point. So I got up again around 2 hours later, I would say, and I had a little bit of my mucus plug out. And at that point, I did text my doula because I was just so excited, like the signs were happening. So I texted her like, "Hey, just so you know, I had some signs, and you know, the baby might come this weekend." That's all I told her. And yeah, I went back to bed again. I wanted to save my energy, and who knows, the baby could come, you know, within a couple hours, or the baby could come in a couple days. You really don't know. So I went back to bed and um again I woke up to use the restroom, and then at that point I had a bloody show. So I did text my midwife at that point and let her know everything that had been happening. Um yeah, and she just said to keep her updated. Um
And at
yeah,
this
I went back.
point, yeah, and at
Mhm.
this point, so you didn't have really contractions at this point, though. You could go back to sleep. Like it was just
Yeah,
these little signs. You had no contractions.
very very mild
Mm,
like period cramps is what it
yeah,
felt like. So I was able to go back to sleep.
love that. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, so once we woke up for the day, it must have been around maybe 7 in the morning. I mean, we were both excited, like we are just thinking, you know, baby's gonna come this weekend. And yeah, he had already texted in his work that he wasn't gonna come in. And we said let's go get some groceries. Let's make sure we have like all the food that we need and in preparation for the birth. So yeah, we went, drove to the grocery store. I don't think I had one like period cramping sensation. So I guess they were surges, right? So I didn't feel anything on the way to the grocery store, and then we were kind of walking in there, and I was thinking, oh, like maybe it's gonna like stop, you know, maybe it's just gonna stop completely. Who knows? And we were walking and I felt another surge. And so I was like, okay, this is good. Like it's continuing. When we got back home, we just did our typical schedule. You know, we had our breakfast together, and he said my husband suggested we go on a couple of walks so to see if we can like pick up some of the surges. So we took a walk like down the neighborhood. I think I might have felt just like one surge, and they were like hours apart. It wasn't close at all. So we just, you know, went back home. I took a nap and he ran some errands. And yeah, the surges were coming about every hour, and they were all, well, not every hour, I'm sorry, every couple of hours. And they were very manageable. It wasn't until I would say like 5 p.m. they started to pick up a little bit more. So he kind of got the idea that, yeah, that this is pretty established that the baby is going to come soon. So he started to inflate the pool, and he inflated the pool like, yeah, around 5 p.m. And then we went to go grab some dinner. So we just went to go pick it up. And in the car is when I felt like a really powerful surge. And I don't think I didn't let him on to know how powerful they were. I feel like I handled them very well. And he didn't really have an idea that they were like really strong at that point. Yeah. And so he was inside picking up the food, and I was in the car just like very uncomfortable because I'm in the seat of the car, and I we lived down the street, and I was like, I just want to be home. Like I wish we could just go home, but I have to wait for him to pick the food up. So
And how often were
yeah,
your contractions coming at this point?
right at that point, they were about every maybe 30 minutes, but I don't know if they were that close because we were doing things and I was like moving around. But once we got home, they did kind of spread out again to about every hour.
Okay, so you were still
So
having, it was
mhm,
very super
very
duper early.
regular.
Yeah, that was very
Yes.
spaced out. Yes.
Yes. And they were super irregular because once we got home and we were eating, it must have been around like 7 that we started eating and putting a movie on. Our plan was once the contractions were starting that we would like watch a funny movie and it would be like great. Like we had this vision in our mind of like how our early labor was going to be like. But once we finished our food and the movie was maybe like, I don't know, 10 minutes in, I could feel that I was going deeper into labor. And I said, turn the movie off. I don't, I need quiet. I'm going to go to sleep. And I think at that point he understood, okay, she's kind of going into labor. I'm going to fill the pool up. So he was doing that while I was kind of getting ready for bed. And um, yeah, they were coming a lot stronger at that point, and I was just breathing through them. I think it in that beginning stage, it helped for me to just kind of be in the dark in the bedroom, and then he was in the living room filling up the pool. Um,
That's a bit
and I
early to
tried
fill
to
up the
lay
pool though,
down.
isn't it? It's a little bit
What was
early.
that
It's a little bit,
early?
it's a
Hmm.
little bit early to fill up the pool at that stage when you're just kind of in the early stages. So at this point,
Yeah.
were they coming closer then at this point when you went to bed?
At this point, they were still about every, I would say like 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
And
So that's
but
super duper early. Yeah.
yes, but I still felt like I was in labor land. I
Yeah.
felt
Oh
nauseous in
no.
between the surges.
Mm,
Um, and I was between every surge, it was like I was preparing for the next one.
mm,
So it felt like they were close together because my mind was just on the next surge and the next surge. I tried to go to bed, but that night is when my labor really established. So I was kind of in and out of bed, going to the restroom, trying to cope through each surge. I would bounce on my ball a little bit, and that helped. And then I think around maybe like 2, 3 in the morning, it was like there was no position that was comfortable anymore. And I felt at that point like, okay, there's no going back to bed at this point. Around 3:30 in the morning, I would say, I started feeling even more nauseous. So I ran to the restroom and then I just threw up. And I remember thinking, this is awesome. Like this is what all of everybody has like talked about, because I know not everybody experiences that, but I've heard, different women on the podcast say that after they throw up, it really picked up for them. So I just remember thinking this is a good sign, all of everything is happening the way that it needs to. Because I never threw up once during my pregnancy. I never had any kind of like morning sickness. So for this to be happening during my labor, I thought like, hey, this is a great sign. Like this means like your body is ready to have the baby. Um, so after that, I think my husband saw that that the labor is more established, and he decided to call our doula. And when she came, I remember seeing her feet on the corner, but she came in so quietly. But I saw her feet on the corner of my eye, and I was so in labor land. At that point, I was just, coping through each surge. They must have been coming in like every 5 to 10 minutes at that point. It
Mm,
was maybe like 4 in the morning now.
mm.
Um, and she suggested that we go to the pool and see if that will like help relax me a little bit. But I felt like I needed our midwife there. So my husband called her, and I didn't want to go in the pool without her support. But once she already brought up the pool, I was like, okay, like let's do it because maybe that will help. So I got in the pool and I remember it was so warm. I was like, this is almost too warm, but let's do it. And yeah, I coped through some contractions while I was in the pool, and then our midwife came, and I felt relief, I feel, because she was a huge support for me, and she was like a motherly figure almost, and it's like you need that to just relax, and it just signified, okay, like your baby is really coming, like this is really happening. So yeah, when she came, she like held my hand, just let me know like I'm doing a good job. And um, I got the urge to push in the pool. So
Was
my
that
body
just
just,
after the midwife came?
well,
Mm.
it must have been about an hour. But the time,
Mm.
it feels so close together, but I must have been in the pool for about an hour.
I love
So it
this
was
because,
probably about
you
5 in the morning.
yeah, I love this because, your birth story is not, I mean, all births are very different, right? But I love how your
Hmm.
story is very atypical in that you literally had, for all that day, you had like one contraction an hour until
Yeah,
like that kind of midnight or a little bit later, where you then maybe had every 5, every 10 minutes, which is still kind of early. And then
yeah,
literally an hour after your midwife comes, you feel the urge to push. So I'm very curious for the rest
yes.
of the story. Because I also
Yeah.
love how I love how unique every woman is and every baby and every birth journey, and nothing
Hmm.
is the standard normal, Friedman's curve kind of thing. Like it's very rare.
Yeah.
And I love when women tell these stories that are, very unique. Mm.
Hmm. Yeah, they're also different, and I liked that listening to the podcast and hearing every every woman has their own unique journey, and I was able to relate to all of the experiences because my birth had a little bit of everything, if that makes sense. Like nothing that I was experiencing was new because I've heard it through so many women's stories. Um, so when my body started to push without me pushing, was like, oh, this is what they're talking about, when they say you don't have to push, like your body knows how to push on its own. And so I got that urge to push, and yeah, after experiencing that, I remember thinking like, okay, there's no going back from this. You have to push until your baby is out, basically. And what helped me was just kind of telling myself positive affirmations, telling myself, you're not the first person to do this. Other women have done this before, and now it's your turn. And, I've been preparing for this for many months, even before my pregnancy, and now you're doing it. And, you're not doing this alone. You're doing this with your husband. You're doing this with your doula, with your midwife. And that is what helped me, or else I think my mind would just have kind of given into the fears of I can't do this. And because out loud I was saying I can't do this anymore, you guys, like I can't do this, this is too hard, this hurts too much. But on the inside I was telling myself, no, yes, yes, you can do this and you're doing this. um but I think voicing that I couldn't do this, and then reassuring me that I could, helped me to make it to the next surge and make it to the next surge. And after being in the pool pushing for a while, my midwife suggested we get out to use the restroom. And I knew that I could pee in the pool, but I also trusted her judgment. So anything that she suggested, I said, okay, yes, like I trust you. Let's get out of the pool. So I went out to use the restroom and the rest of my waters broke. And I was so happy again. I was like, okay, this is another, progress. This is more the next step for me to meet my baby. And I remember thinking, it's going to really pick up now. From what I hear, every time the water breaks, like it's going to be another level of intensity. So I was just kind of like mentally preparing myself for that. And I think I might have done just one surge sitting on the toilet. And it was so painful. I don't know if it was the position that I was in or, this is just labor. This is just that next step. And I tried doing a couple of surges standing up, and that felt a little bit better. Um, but it was still, of course, the surges are going to be painful. So then my midwife suggested we go to the bedroom, and I was like, yes, like I don't think I could be standing anymore. And also I'm just exhausted. Like I need to lay down. And I wanted to just go to sleep. I said, can you guys just give me a blanket so that I can go to sleep? They're like, no, you can't, you're in labor, like you have to have your baby. So I said, okay, well, let me at least try to do some pushing while I lie on my side. So I tried that, but I felt like there wasn't much progress and it just didn't feel right. So we might have done maybe 3 pushes on my side. And then they suggested I get on my hands and knees and try that. So at that point, those surges, I felt very like I just like needed someone to like do it for me, but obviously that wasn't possible. So I just like held on to my husband and just thinking like it's okay, like everybody here is supporting you. You got this. Like you have to do this. You're the only one who can birth your baby. And I don't know, I just felt like I had to grab onto like I needed other people's strength to like help me through it. Um and my midwife was kind of coaching me on how to push with my body's natural urge to push. And so I think when I was on my hands and knees is when I kind of understood what that meant. And I was like pushing more effectively at that point, and really opening with each surge that I was getting. But it was just I felt like it wasn't going to end. Like, when is this going to end? I feel like I've been doing this for hours and I'm exhausted. And, like, am I doing this right? Is kind of how I felt. Um, and then they suggested my doula suggested I try standing up and using our sling ring. I think that's what they're called. And so I got up, I wrapped that around my back and I had my arms up. And somebody mentioned that when you have your arms up and you're pushing, that helps to open you up more. So that's what I had in my mind is like, this is going to help you open up more. Just like keep making those the low moaning tones, and, just keep your jaw relaxed and keep your hands relaxed. And I kept pushing in that standing upright position with like my husband helping me up because I was just so exhausted. I felt like I wanted to lie down. And no, my midwife said, like, you're really opening now. Like, you can see her head. If you want, you can like go in and feel. So I was like, okay, like this is actually working. It's this yeah, and just didn't believe how it was unfolding. So I went down and I felt, and it just felt like kind of like slimy, her head felt slimy. And um she reminded me that the when the head is crowning, that I'm going to feel like a burning sensation, that I'm gonna feel the ring of fire. And I remember thinking, yeah, I've heard of that many times. Like many women have described that. And I could do it. Like if they could do it, I could do it. And she said that I'm gonna want to like fight it, and I might want to just like push to kind of get it over with, but don't do that because, you don't want to tear. So just kind of like sit with the pain. So I said, yes, like I can do that because I don't, I really don't want to tear. So I'm going to do what you're telling me to do. And yeah, I remember feeling that stretching feeling and thinking, like this isn't bad at all. Like compared to the pushing surges where I was like on my hands and knees and I felt kind of like desperate. This was like you're gonna meet your baby in the next couple pushes. So I felt like that ring of fire was it it wasn't as bad as like most people explain it. And I was just happy to be at that point because I knew, my baby was going to be born really soon. And it must have been around like 7:30 in the morning at that point. And I felt really good because I could hear the birds chirping outside, the sunlight was coming in through the windows, through the curtains, and I'm such a morning person, so I just felt like, this is awesome. Like I'm about to have my baby right now and it's like my favorite time of the day. So I was just really excited for them. And after the ring of fire, my midwife said that her like she's gonna come out on the next push. And I asked her to if she could catch the baby. I know I wanted to catch my baby, and that was my plan. But just being so exhausted and like standing in that upright position, I felt like there was no way that I was able to kind of like bend down and grab her without the support of the ring sling, without the support of like me grabbing onto my husband. So I said, go ahead, Debbie, like go ahead and grab my baby, like and then you can give her to me. So she's like, are you sure? And I said, yes, yes. Like I'm just happy that like my baby is coming. And so after the ring of fire, I think I had like one more push. Baby was out, and I was like, my baby's here. I was so excited. I was like, my baby is born. My baby is born. Um, she passed her down to me. Well, we didn't know that it was a little girl at the time, but she passed her down to me, and I just like sat down. Me and my husband were crying. We were just so happy. And then we finally, checked and we saw that we had a little girl. And we just kind of sat there for a while, just like admiring her. And I was like counting her fingers, counting her toes, and was kind of like massaging her. Is it the vernix?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, just kind of like massaging that into her skin. And then we got up to lie in bed, and I really wanted to establish breastfeeding because that was like so important to me, and I know how important like that first hour is. So I tried to latch her on, and she was just like this tiny little thing like trying to drink, but she was latching on. So I was really happy about that. And in the back of my mind, I thought about, you're going to have to birth your placenta soon. But I also didn't want to like interrupt this hour with the baby. So I kind of like put it behind my mind, but it was something that was like still there. But I'm very trusting in, the way things unfold. I feel like that's the way it's supposed to happen. So I just remember thinking, your placenta's gonna come and it's gonna be fine. So, just enjoy these moments. And it had about an hour had passed, and my midwife said, like, okay, do you want to try to get the placenta? And so I handed the baby to her dad, and I tried to use the restroom, and we tried to catch the placenta that way, but nothing was coming. I didn't really feel any surges anymore. So she suggested like squatting and coughing, like pushing on my belly a little bit, and nothing was really working. And she had these like tinctures to try. I tried those, and that wasn't helping. And again, I was just being trusting of the process, thinking, like if you have to go to the hospital, okay, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Like it's the placenta is gonna come on its own time. But after about 3 hours, she suggested I go to the hospital, and that was my biggest fear. But I had already birthed my baby, so I said, I already did what I came here to do. I birthed my baby at home, and if my midwife is saying that it's a good idea to go to the hospital to get my placenta out, then like I trust her, and I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So me and my husband drove to the hospital, and our midwife followed us. And on the drive there, I was like very clear headed because yeah, I was out of that labor land, and I remember telling him like, "Hey, we're about to go into the hospital right now, and we just had a baby at home, and they might not be like very accepting of that. So we need to remind ourselves like kind of like what that hospital culture is like, and that they might not be the nicest to us, and they might not respect us a lot, and so we need to like just be strong in our decisions and like be on the same page, me and you, because they're probably not going to be on the same page as us. And so we just wanted to go in remembering that so that we don't feel like very pressured to do something that we didn't want to do. um so once we got there, I did feel like the doctor was kind of rude to us because I was asking lots of questions, and I wanted to know, what's the plan, and what kind of medications are you guys going to give me, and like what's the timeline, when can I leave? And I just wanted to like know what was going to happen, or what were the possibilities of what was going to happen. And she said, "Can I ask you something?" She's like, "I don't want to be rude, but why did you come here?" And I was like, "Well, I came because my I'm having trouble delivering my placenta, and I need help. Um, but that doesn't mean that I don't have questions,
Yeah.
that I don't want to know what's going to happen."
Mm.
And yeah, so she answered my questions, but it was hard because that's not what we wanted.
Yeah.
We didn't want that to happen, but we do understand that there is a time and place for that medical intervention, and
Yeah.
that was the time and place. It was just like unfortunate that was that kind of energy going into the hospital.
Yeah.
So, and
It is
that's something that
unfortunately. Yeah.
mhm, that's something that I remember like being in the hospital bed and just like crying and
Mm.
saying like it's okay, just accept it, because yeah, because this is it's not something that you want to carry with
Mm.
you after you leave. You just had a baby, and you want to have the best feelings so that you can have like a good postpartum, so that you can have good breastfeeding. um so I just needed to like let out a good cry when I was in there, and then after I was like, okay, I'm fine, and let's get this placenta out so that we can go back home.
Yeah.
And after I got out and they extracted the placenta, um my husband met me as I was coming out. He had brought the baby so that I could like breastfeed her while I was there. So that was great. And that night the three of us were able to go back home, and yeah, we were just like so happy to be home together, to be back in the environment where we birthed her. And um yeah, it was great to have the support from our doula, from our midwife during that time. And I'm really thankful that we took classes and we kind of educated ourselves so that we could go into that hospital environment and like feel empowered in the decisions that we were making. And um yeah, so yeah, I'm really happy that I had that support team.
Beautiful. Yeah, when it comes to the placenta, some women don't have a lot of afterbirth pains. When you have had your
Hmm.
baby, we want the womb to continue to contract so that you birth your placenta, right? And there is this kind of guideline, right, in hospital that you should birth your placenta before 1 hour, as potentially the cervix starts closing. We don't know exactly when, and of course, all women are different. Some women will birth their placentas hours after their baby's
Mm-hmm.
born, and it's no problem. And for some, it does not want to come out. And there's so many different layers to why that is, right? Physical, but maybe also sometimes emotional, spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
mental, depending on the environment, depending on if, you know, so there's so many things, people forget, and for anyone listening, forget that that third stage is still part of that birthing process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to encourage, like you did, you were breastfeeding, but still your afterbirth pains weren't really coming on. And I heard, your midwife gave you 3 hours, which is beautiful. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that kind of half an hour in going, oh, you need to get the placenta out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't sound like you were symptomatic. You weren't bleeding. There was no emergency there. It just didn't
No.
want to come. And so you made that decision with your midwife to move into the hospital. Now, as we know, unfortunately, that attitude to home birthing moms is really widespread. And I love how empowered you were in that conversation, and that you could say that back to the doctor, which was so right to say.
Mm-hmm.
It is terrible that you had to, and unfortunately, you just have to, like you said to your husband, you have to like armor yourself when you go in. That
Yes. Yeah.
most likely you'll have that experience. If you don't, that's amazing, great. And there's some beautiful doctors and midwives in the system too, but unfortunately, a lot of them are not, and they'll approach you in that very unkind manner. But you were
Yeah.
so empowered in your conversation with her, going like, yes, I'm here because I need your help, because that's also part of birth. We can aim to
Mm-hmm.
have a natural physiological birth, but sometimes we're going to need medical help, and that's okay. That's a part of
Yeah.
some of our journeys, and there's wisdom in that too. Your wisdom maybe was that to stand in front of this really rude obstetrician and going like, hey, you don't speak to me like that. Like, I'm a sovereign woman. I have questions. I'm going to have questions
Yes.
whether whether or not you want it or not. That's a part of your job to be respectful towards me. Like, that's patient law. I could sue you your ass.
Right.
I mean, I wish that people start saying that to these obstetricians, because they're so rude sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Just going like, you know what? Do you know about patient law? Do you know about informed consent? Me asking questions
Exactly.
is a part of that, and it's a part of your job description.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'm going on a tangent, but I love that you had that, and I'm sorry you experienced that, but maybe that also gave you even a deeper sense of knowing that you could stand up truly for yourself in that very vulnerable,
Yes.
very vulnerable state you were in, but you had the mama lioness in you going ruff back, and you went back home and had your
Mm-hmm.
your beautiful postpartum afterwards after having the help you needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was thankful that, we were able to get the placenta out and everything was fine. And although, I had to be in a hospital, I was okay with that too, because I have to accept it so that there's no shame around that.
Mhm.
I know some women, there's like shame around maybe taking, getting the epidural or getting a C-section or whatever the case is. And some of the times it truly is necessary. And for me, I didn't want it to be a part of my story. But again, I do believe that everything like happens for a reason, and it was necessary. So I just felt like very empowered, and me and my husband talked it over and said, is this really what we're going to do? And, we asked all the questions that we needed. And so we felt very like empowered in our decision. So when we got home, we could kind of just like forget about it. It's like we
Mm,
already dealt with it and like processed it emotionally, and we could just like move on from that and fully focus on our postpartum now, because he was able to stay for 3 weeks, and like we needed that to like stay in our bubble,
mm.
not have visitors, and it was just yeah, it was just me and him like getting to know our baby.
That's beautiful and how precious. I wish every woman had that support. for at least the first few weeks, if not longer. And for the dads too, or the partners, like it's an important time in their life as well to be present with their
Hmm.
new baby. And our society doesn't seem to really understand that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really important for us, was for him to be there and to support me so that I can support the baby. And we were very like vocal with our family to just like respect our time for the first at least 3 weeks that he was going to be off, is just kind of respect our time, and we will let you know when we're ready for visitors. And even then, like, we're probably only going to be comfortable with like their grandma and grandpa coming, with our parents coming to support us. And then, later because we have a big family, later we'll bring in more people. It's just so important to like keep those stress levels down and like stay in that love bubble for as long as possible. I feel like it's how you establish a good postpartum and how you establish a good breastfeeding. And that was like so important for us.
I love that. I love hearing this because still there's so many first-time mamas, especially who don't understand this. And I love that you
Mhm.
did and that you planned for it and that you had strong boundaries and that you and your partner, your husband, could have this really precious time to heal and bond and really be together in your bubble. And I
Yeah.
love that because you said before we started recording, like, even though you planned for a home birth, you
Hmm.
also were prepared in case of transfer. You were kind of prepared for in case of having to go to the hospital for some reason. And I think that that's really
Hmm.
wise. I think, plan for your dream birth and focus on that, but have a plan B that's just there. And so that
Right.
in case you need help, right? And there is no shame in that. This podcast is all about featuring all the natural, empowering birth experiences because, we need those stories out there as there are so many other stories floating around, right? We need this
Yeah.
kind of uh, beautiful, nourishing platform. But that doesn't mean that sometimes we are going to need medical help. It's a part of, you know, some births and some babies' journeys as well. Some
Mm.
mama's journeys, some babies' journeys. And there's no shame in that. There's no failure in that. When we truly need it, you know, amazing that it's there for us, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we can still have empowering births. And I really want to mention that because a natural birth doesn't equate an empowering birth.
Mm.
And, a cesarean and a medicalized birth, an induction can also be an empowering birth. And the way that women most of the time feel like they had an empowering birth is that they had a voice, that they felt strong in the
Mhm.
decision making, and that they were listened to and respected. Um,
Yes.
and you made sure that that happened to you. When things
Mhm.
deviated from the normal, that didn't, unfold the way you wanted, you were very empowered in your decision making all the way through. You made those decisions, and that I think really helps feeling still super empowered in your birth experience, whatever kind of outcome you have.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we felt so confident after that experience, is because we were the ones making the decisions. We listened to like what the doctor had to say. But at the end of the day, we have the option to accept or decline anything that happens to us. So, mhm.
And that is a piece of information that everyone needs to deeply integrate into their psyche, right? To like whatever you face, like it is your decisions in the home, in the birth center, in the hospital, you are the one that makes the decisions
Yes.
always. Thank you, Denise.
Yeah.
So, if you had a first time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdoms would you give to her?
I would first tell her to just kind of like sit with your fears and explore your fears, even if it's unrelated to birth. Just your fears in general, and like addressing them and figuring out where they stem from is going to help you become a more confident person. It's going to help you be more at peace with yourself. And then when you have that peace, you're able to be more connected with your intuition, to be more connected with your gut feelings and like trust yourself. And that is so necessary for, the journey of pregnancy, for the journey of birth, because like you said, you're the one who makes the decisions. So when you trust yourself, you can trust your judgment fully. You're not constantly in doubt, and you're not constantly seeking for like validation from maybe your OB, your midwife, society, right? Or like your parents, whoever, because having, like, if you want to have a home birth, or you want to have a, a type of birth that is not as common right now, you're going to get a lot of like different opinions and a lot of advice. But if you stand strong and like what you believe, then like that's what's going to benefit you. That's what's going to benefit your baby. And that's how you're going to have the best experience. So I would say to just explore your fears, and then also just educate yourself on, what it is you're getting into. If you do want to have a hospital birth, explore like what kind of culture that is. So that you understand like what are the possibilities if you take that route, and then do the same for home birth, so that the more knowledge that that you have, you're able to make, again, better decisions. um
Mm.
and yes, so I would just say be the driver in your pregnancy, and give your don't give the wheel to somebody else, like, because this is your journey, this is your pregnancy and your experience. And so, yeah, just like don't give up your decision making to somebody else.
Mm.
And yeah, lastly, I would say to just honor that postpartum period, because it's so important, and it really sets you up for like the type of motherhood that you're going to have, and like the type of breastfeeding journey that you're going to have. So the more you prepare for that, I think the better you're going to be. Like, prepare for your postpartum just as much as you prepare for your birth. Just as much as you prepare for the baby showers and for the baby room and all of that, like, prepare for your postpartum as well, because you need to be in a good mental space so that you can like be the best mom that you can be.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Denise, for coming on the Natural Birth Podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And, I was glad talking to you finally. And thank you, Anna, for all that you do. The podcast helped me like have the birth that I wanted. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as the Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.